Legal professionals of Reddit, what's the funniest way you've ever seen a lawyer or defendant blow a court case? I once attended oral arguments for US Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. It's pretty much the big time. I watched a lawyer argue that his client received what's known as ineffective assistance of counsel at the trial from which he was appealing. The attorney, however, was not doing a very good job during oral arguments. So, at one point one of the judges on the panel leans forward and asks him, "Counselor, are you currently providing ineffective assistance of counsel?" My brother was on a jury back in the days of MySpace. A woman had been hit by a big rig during foggy weather. She was suing for a back injury. The last day of the trial they ask her if she has a MySpace account and brought up her site for the jury to see. I think all profiles were opened then. There's a picture of her dancing on the hood of a car and right next to it is a text exchange of her saying that she shouldn't go out too much because her lawyer says that she has to look injured. Needless to say, she lost that case. I represent school districts. One of my clients has a farm that is used to teach agricultural science to the students. The manager of the farm decides to brutally euthanize a ton of chickens in full view of a group of elementary school students. Sometimes, farms have to euthanize chickens. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that he was whacking the chickens over the head with a hammer. And he had to whack each chicken like 5-6 times before they died because he is apparently some kind of psychopath. The poor chickens were not dying. That didn't deter him. If one refused to die, he'd just toss the chicken on the ground and try again with another one. But the birds were all getting horrifically damaged. So they were flapping in circles on the ground, or walking with terrible, stuttering limps, or screaming. One of the kids recorded it and Jesus Christ, it was awful to watch. So, I recommended the school district fire him immediately because holy hell, he sued for gender discrimination. I had a case where a lawyer who apparently had expertise in areas other than litigation decided to litigate a case for one of his clients. He asks to depose my guy. No problem. I meet with my guy and get him all prepared for testimony. We sit down at the deposition. He's sworn in and we're ready to go. First question isn't "would you please state your name?" or anything like that. First question was something like, "Isn't it the truth in this case that on the 6th of April, 2004 you," and then a conclusory statement about his whole claim. I objected. My guy says no. The lawyer shuffled his papers and after a lengthy pause asks the second question, "You sure?" A funny historical one here. Marshal Nee is on trial for treason after Napoleon gets overthrown for the second time. His lawyer desperately tries to save the marshal's life with an unusual take on things. Due to a border change, Marshal Nee's hometown was, at the time of the trial, in Prussia. Therefore, argued the lawyer, Marshal Nee was not technically French and accordingly could not be guilty of treason. Marshal Nee disagreed and shouted out to the court, "I am French and I will remain French." He was subsequently found guilty and sentenced to death. This also has a double whammy with baddest last words. He asked for and was given permission to lead his own firing squad. His last words to them were, "Soldiers, when I give the command to fire, fire straight at my heart. Wait for the order. It will be my last to you. I protest against my condemnation. I have fought 100 battles for France, and not one against her. Soldiers, fire." Talk about a way to die. A short one. The judge recused himself from a criminal case, publicly stating that he knew the defendant and he was a son of a bitch and guilty as hell. Lawyer was verbally running through the evidence against the guy he was defending, trying to claim there wasn't enough to even call a trial. All totally fine. Except he said, "I believe a more seasoned judge wouldn't have let this trial move forward," not knowing that the judge he's speaking to gave the okay to move the trial to this court. He was immediately given a hard motion denied. I was the respondent, not the lawyer, in a civil case where the county accused me of violating a rule that a house cannot have more than 2 parties in a month. The county's prime witness admitted, on the stand, that 1. The rule was implemented specifically in response to a complaint against me. 2. The rule was not written in the county code. 3. The rule was not included in my warning letter nor in my citation. 4. The county had no expectation of ever applying this rule to any other resident in the future. The judge declared the rule null and void. My father is an attorney and he always had a story for us when we'd ask him this question. He tells it way better than I do, but I'll give it a shot. Some dude was allegedly smashing a wall with a sledgehammer with others in order to break into a private property. The cops rolled up, and he's the only one to get caught. Fast forward a few months, and this guy's in court. Apparently a cop says something about how the defendant was the only one caught, but there were 2 other men who fled on foot and couldn't be apprehended. My father's client's face lights up in an aha moment and immediately tells the judge, "Not true, there were 4 of us." I guess he thought if he could disprove someone at the said he'd be let go. Safe to say he was found guilty of vandalism. My father says the judge just kind of sighed and told my father it would be a good idea to keep his client quiet. I'm an attorney and I heard about a hearing where there were several criminal defendants before the judge. The judge noticed a strong pot smell in the courtroom and asked if any of the defendants had pot on them. No one came forward and the judge proceeded, but the odor became stronger and stronger. Finally the judge demanded the perpetrator to come forward. Finally one of them came forward and had several bags of weed on him. I'm not sure what the charges were before him that day, but I wouldn't want to have been his attorney. Defendant is apprehended for warrants and asks judge for bail. Tells judge he moved and was not served with the warrants. Some question as to his identity. Judge asks defendant where he was born. Def says Puerto Rico. Defendant totally looks mestizo, not Puerto Rican at all. Judge asks where in Puerto Rico. Defendant says San Juan. Judge asks defendant, when were you last in San Juan? Defendant says a couple of years ago. Judge asked defendant, how did you get there? Defendant replies, I went on the Amtrak. Judge would not grant bail. When you flunk geography, it's for a long time. Not a legal professional, but I do have a good story on this topic. 15 or so years ago, my dad was the manager of a small hotel. One of the semi-regular customers was this big Samoan dude, who booked in for a day at a time, always had a few visitors, and always paid in cash, in a 1-to-1 conversion with American dollars, highly unusual in Australia. Dad always said he was a great customer, very friendly with the staff, never gave anyone any problems, and always had a bit of a chat when he checked in. One day a couple of detectives rocked up and asked to speak to my dad. They showed him a photo of the aforementioned customer and asked if he was currently staying in the hotel. Dad confirmed that he was, and in a matter of minutes a small contingent of cops arrived, stormed the room and escorted the guy away in handcuffs. Turns out the guy was a pretty major drug dealer and was wanted in a couple of states. Cut to the court date quite some time later. My dad is in the witness stand, and, for whatever reason, the defense is trying to make out like my dad didn't know the defendant and had never seen him before. Obviously my dad insisted that he did in fact know the defendant, but that line persisted from the defense. As my dad left the witness box, he walked past the defendant and said, "Hi Barry," to which Barry enthusiastically replied, "Hi Jason, how are you?" While I'm sure this wasn't the only thing that counted against him in the case, it certainly can't have helped. He ended up getting quite a few years in jail. Names changed. Ovs. A defense lawyer was delivering her closing statement to the jury. In her final sentence, she said, "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I urge you to find my client guilty." There was a moment of silence and she then says, "Not guilty. I meant to say not guilty." I was an expert engineer witness at a deposition defending a contractor who happened to be an engineer himself. Plaintiff claimed he was liable as an engineer as well as the contractor. Defense was he was the contractor, but that doesn't mean he was the engineer for the project just because he was one. After 6 hours of headache-inducing questioning, plaintiff's lawyer pulls out a letter from and certified by the contractor that simply stated, "I am the engineer for the project." He sits back and basically has that look of doubt. "Let's see what you got to say now, mfa." Sovereign citizens always make for a good time. There was the guy getting a divorce from his wife of 25 years. His entire argument for why he shouldn't pay alimony to his wife, who stayed home taking care of their 8 kids, 3 of whom were still at home, is that since his wife would no longer do her marital duties, it wasn't a marriage. She wouldn't sleep with him because he was against trying to prevent more kids happening at all. Then reference the Bible on top of it. The judge's face was priceless. After argument from the assistant district attorney, the judge asked defense counsel why he should allow the defendant to remain on his own recognizance. Defense counsel looks up, obviously searching for any reason he can because he knows his client is a dirtbag, and this is what he comes up with. Because his girlfriend lives in the apartment above mine and I'll hear her crying all night. Defendant remanded to jail. Not an exact fit for the answer, but I once worked at a company where we found out that a lawyer was trying to arrange a class action suit against us. Before it got off the ground, we found out because this lawyer attempted to email her client, but accidentally emailed us instead, with all the details of the class action. I observed a case where the plaintiff attorney played Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror as his closing argument to evoke an emotional response in the jury. He lost. I worked as a paralegal in a firm specializing in land use litigation and real estate. Another paralegal's husband got a DWI, and as a favor to her, one of the partners offered to defend her husband in court. This is a small town with a landmark windmill in the center of town. Well, this paralegal's husband's, who we all called the missing link, DWI stemmed from him crashing his car into the windmill. Front page of the local paper. Reporters at the arraignment. The whole 9 yards. So the law firm partner tells the missing link that when the judge asks him how many beers he had before his accident, he should tell her he had 3. He proceeds to stand in front of the judge and tell her he had 3 cases. The whole room started laughing and he ended up getting jail time. A prominent female attorney didn't like the judge's ruling in a family law case. She asked him if he was from another planet. The judge said, "I beg your pardon." She approached the bench, without permission, and very rudely repeated her question. Judge told her to apologize. She refused. The judge had her thrown in the lockup for contempt of court. Obligatory, not a lawyer, but I took a class on constitutional rights where we had to read decisions from my country's Supreme Court. There was this one where a woman was suing her employer, a company, because IT had found 6 pics of the woman on the company's computer. IT gave the tip to HR, who proceeded to contact the company's legal department. Anyhow, the woman was fired and she sued because she claimed that by showing the pics to the lawyer the company was going against her right to privacy. HR also threatened to release the pics to the other employees if the woman kept suing or something like that. In the end, the court decided that HR had to return the pics to the woman, and that was it. The funny thing was that the woman claimed that those pics weren't 6 pics. Even though she was naked and in suggestive poses, she claimed that she had arrived tired from work, passed out on her bed, and her little daughter took those pics. Not entirely on topic, but it's a funny moment from a court case, so I thought I'd share. Trigger warning: child sexual abuse. This was when I was still in law school, and we were required to go observe a trial at the county courthouse as part of one of our classes. Being the slacker that I was, it was nearing the deadline and I hadn't gone to watch a day of trial yet. So one of my buddies tells me to tag along with him and some other people after class one day. They've got a trial picked out and we can go to happy hour before. Sweet, I'm in. Now the buddy that invited me is a veteran, which is only relevant because it explains his extremely dark sense of humor. Now, I also have a dark sense of humor, but this guy would say something that would make my hair stand up. So we get to the courthouse and go in and sit in the gallery, and it begins to dawn on me what kind of trial we're watching. I hadn't thought to ask beforehand. A young girl's, under 13, stepfather was being accused of molesting her. We were there on the day that the state was presenting its evidence, and we walked in right when the prosecutor was doing a direct examination of their expert witness. The expert witness in this case was a gynecologist, and the evidence was a gigantic blown up picture of the inside of this little girl's V, highlighting tears in the hymen and other damage consistent with sexual abuse. Now, during a direct examination of an expert witness, the testimony is very methodical because you're establishing things for the record. And so the lawyer is going through saying stuff like, "What is this here?" And the gynecologist is like, part of a woman's reproductive organs. It felt like the darkest health class in the world. So as this is happening in a very somber courtroom, my buddy decides to lean over and say, "My wife is gonna be so ducking excited that I finally know where everything is." You know when you try to stifle a really inappropriate laugh, and that only makes you want to laugh harder? Yeah. Imagine that. But in the middle of a quiet courtroom where a young girl's stepfather is being tried for serious sexual abuse. I almost got a hernia trying to keep quiet. Oh, and another funny moment. The defense's argument to explain where the damage came from was that the young girl had been vigorously masturbating with a hairbrush. They then produced the hairbrush as evidence, and the sweaty public defender, in his rumpled suit, demonstrated using the hairbrush in his hand. So maybe that's a more appropriate answer to the question. TLDR, I'm going straight to hell. In courtroom where all they do is restraining orders. Everyone gets there at one time in the morning and sits in the chairs, and judge calls the cases one by one. Dude purposely sits next to girl getting the restraining order against him and starts trying to hold her hand on it. She yells and asks for help, and bro had to wait outside. When it was his turn, the judge was so mad he almost sent him to jail. Flashing his gun at the witness during a deposition. Is suspended for flashing gun at deposition. Other appalling behavior. Not me, not a legal professional, but my brother's EMT instructor used to live in Chicago. This one's a 2-4. The instructor himself had his license suspended for numerous traffic charges, including evading police, but forgot about his arraignment date until about an hour prior. So the guy hops on motorcycle and drives himself to the court. Remember this for later. The dude in the court right before him is a Hispanic guy. The judge reads off everything he's charged with, and then the conversation goes like this. Judge, M.R. Gonzalez. How do you plead? Gonzalez. No habla Ingles. Judge, M.R. Gonzalez. Do you understand a word I'm saying? Gonzalez. No habla Ingles. Judge, M.R. Gonzalez. Am I to understand that this whole time no one has bothered to get a translator for you? Gonzalez. No habla Ingles. Judge, well, I guess if you can't understand what you're charged with, we'll have to drop all the charges. Gonzalez. Gracious. Senor. Starts walking out. Judge, get back in here. After him, the instructor goes up. Judge reads his charges and then asks him how he got to the court that day. Instructor. Oh, my brother gave me a ride. Judge, is that right? Instructor. Yes, Your Honor. Judge, looking at the bailiff, do you have that footage from parking deck 3? He then proceeds to play CCTV footage of him showing up on the exact same bike that he was using for all when he ran from the cops. His license remained suspended, and the judge told him he couldn't go anywhere near the bike during that time. There was even a cop standing next to it when he left. My professor was a lawyer, has worked on both sides of the law, and says the funniest it in court is when someone attempts to represent themselves. He said they never know what they're doing and usually blow it for themselves. Plus counsel is a free right. Edit. I am referring mainly to constitutional law. Defendant was willing to stay on probation conditioned on jail until a bed became available. Due to the circumstances of the defendant's age and minor violations, the judge was very open to the possibility, so this was argued out. In rebuttal to the defense lawyer's argument, the prosecutor said something the defendant didn't like. The defendant stood up, called us all racists, and said, "Send my ducking ass to prison." You know that scene where Jerry Maguire pleads with Rod to help me help you? It was 100x worse. So this wasn't the defendant but a plaintiff. I was on a jury for a civil trial. There were two co-plaintiffs suing one defendant. The first co-plaintiff was being represented by his father, who was an older guy and didn't seem to have much experience in court. For the first week of the trial, seemingly every other question was being objected to, usually because his questions weren't questions or he was trying to elicit testimony that was hearsay. He basically pissed everyone off and presented a terrible case. The second co-plaintiff then gets on the stand, and it was clear that he was there very reluctantly. It gets to the defendant's lawyer turn, cross-examination, and the co-plaintiff blurts out that the only reason why he's there is because of a fiduciary duty to the other plaintiff. Then he gets asked if he feels the defendant owes him any money, and he just says no. It was 6 weeks of this stupid trial. It wasn't every day, and there was no trial during the week for Thanksgiving. But it was excruciating. And we, the jury, ended up awarding no money to anyone. What a colossal waste of time. Full stop. Not a defendant. But there was this dude in the court I interned as who went in with his friend but wore a shirt with the exact color as the ones in group trials. The bailiff mistook him for a convict and was asking him to sit down. Hell no man. I'm just here to see my friend. I ain't got no case. He was the one who got caught. I got away. No, he didn't get away. I spent 2 days in jail many moons ago. I ended up in the felony section. That was fun. Anyhow, I met some pretty interesting characters. One such gentleman. I can't remember his name. Let's call him Bob. There were about 4 of us in a cell and we're just shooting the it and discussing why everyone is in here. Bob is back in jail. He is borderline retarded. Before this current situation, he was facing 2 felonies for, I don't remember. His lawyer eventually convinces the court that he can't stand trial because he is not mentally competent. They eventually let him go. What's the first thing he decides to do once he gets out of jail? Try to steal the first car he sees, in front of the courthouse which is adjacent to the jail. Didn't cross his mind that cops would be in and out of that area all the time. He was back in jail probably 20-30 minutes after he got out, after beating 2 felonies. Oof. Now I was being questioned as a prospective juror in a personal injury case. 8 people had already been seated, and the plaintiff's attorney asked me the same question he had asked everyone else and gotten, yes, of course, as an answer. Do you feel that a person has a right to be compensated for his injuries? My answer, probably louder and slower than it needed to be, was, not if he got hurt because he did something stupid. I had poisoned the entire jury pool, including those already seated. They settled out of court in 10 minutes. For an amount much smaller than they were asking for. Not my case, but still a personal favorite. I was sitting in court waiting for my turn. Case going was a littering case. Officer said he saw the defendant throw the clear wrapper on a pack of gum out of his window. Guy decided to defend himself. Girlfriend takes the stand. Officer has already testified. Guy asks, did I throw a gum wrapper out the window? She replies, no you did not, with this huge grin on her face. The defendant is now also grinning and goes, what did I throw out the window? To which she replies, it was the plastic wrapper from your cigarettes. Guy rests his case right there. Literally thought he would get off because the officer couldn't properly identify the clear plastic that he admits to throwing out the window. I used to be a police officer and spent a lot of time in court and saw a lot of things go really wrong for people. But the one that sticks out is a guy who was up for DUI. He started relating his side of the story and tells the judge he only had 2 bottles of wine. His lawyer is desperately trying to get him to stop talking and he yelled at his own lawyer, don't interrupt me. And the judge says, I think you should take a moment to listen to your attorney, and then he told the judge, don't tell me what to do. I'm not a damn child. And the judge just smiled and leaned back and said, by all means, continue. It went badly for him. And surprisingly, my grandfather was a big time lawyer back in the day for an oil company. In one case, it was the federal government that blew the whole case. My grandpa showed up to court, and the first thing he said was that they didn't have jurisdiction. The judge was like, I'm a federal circuit court judge, the highest judge around. How can this be out of my jurisdiction? The oil in question was drilled in Texas, refined into gasoline in Texas, and sold in Texas gas stations. Since it never crossed state lines, interstate commerce never happened, so the federal government has no jurisdiction. Double quote. The judge just said he was right and closed the case. Pissed off, the guys from Washington showed up to plead not guilty on a weed charge while wearing shorts printed with pot leaves and a shirt with a blunt on it. Lawyer here. I do patent litigation. The best I've seen is the other side cover up, destroy evidence. The punishment for that is not only a court sanction, thousands of $, and the client immediately fires you. If it's bad enough, the court will instruct the jury to consider the destroyed evidence to be bad for the party who destroyed it. I wasn't the lawyer, but a paid expert witness. As our lawyer questioned the federal employee environmental law case, our client jumped up from the table and screamed in his broken English that a cunt. She a ducking lies like a whore. Fines were paid, but we did win the case. Saw a lawyer schedule a preliminary trial on a non-criminal court day. These days were reserved for family. traffic, etc. The lawyer insisted by not doing so, it was a violation of his client's right to a speedy trial. He was in custody at jail and needed to be transported about 2 hours out of town for this court case. The judge knew the lawyer would be late. He was always late. So, when the inmate arrived to court on the scheduled non-criminal court day, the lawyer was, you guessed it, late. Once the defendant was in processed to the courtroom, the judge immediately told the clerks to not call the lawyer's office, and he started looking at his watch. After about 10 minutes, the judge called it and we out-processed the prisoner to the transport vehicle. By the time the prisoner was moving off the property, the lawyer pulled into the parking lot. There was a closed-door session between the judge and lawyer, to be a fly on the wall for that convo. I went to court with a friend who was really nervous, and just needed someone to sit with him. Drug court was very interesting. One girl was there with her mom who kept trying to speak for her. The judge would ask a question. The mom would answer. The judge would remind the mother that her daughter was 18 and could speak for herself. This mom would not listen and was pissing the judge off. The mom even started getting an attitude with the judge and started saying, "She's a child. She's scared." The judge was like, "Mom, she's 18. She's not a child anymore." He finally threatened her with contempt of court and that got her to be quiet. The girl ended up getting a slightly harsher punishment than the other people pleading youthful offender, and I defiantly think her mom helped with that. Instead of having drug test once a month that are $50, she was put on color code. This seemed to make the mom mad, who tried to say something again, but this time the daughter elbowed her. But when I was 20 I had already gotten a speeding ticket and had done my driver's ed class in an attempt to keep it off my record when I got another speeding ticket days before the 1-year period would end. A second ticket while on your probationary period causes a license to be revoked. I go to court by myself and the judge says, well, you're the unfortunate one. The prosecutor laughs and just offers the 8-hour extended course as punishment. Full stop.